Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Junk Be Gone, Phoenix Conversions.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday to you. Welcome into the Sports Source. I'm not sure if you're watching Sunday morning on Channel 6. I'm not sure how long we're going to be with you because ABC News is going to cut in at some point with coverage of John Lewis's funeral. We will be on Facebook Live for the entire show. We will also be on DVR. You can DVR us or watch us tonight at 1:35 until 3:05 on WAT6. That's Sunday night. It won't be in your guide, but you'll have to set your DVR 1:35 WATE for Sunday night. And if you're watching it some other time, you're probably caught in a time loop, and there's nothing I can do for you. But it's going to be a weird one. Thanks for joining us wherever you are. We got a brand new show for you and lots of Vols topics to cover. Let's get into it. First segment of our program brought to you by Phoenix Conversions, home to the biggest selection of truck, van, and SUV accessories in East Tennessee. They can convert vehicles for your business and work needs, or if you need to make a vehicle handicapped accessible, they can do that too. Make your first call to the folks at Phoenix Conversions. All right, want to welcome in our panel for today. We have right over here David Ubben from The Athletic. We have down there Vince Ferrara from WNML Sports Animal 99.1. And right down there, longtime sports writer Chuck Cavaleris. Gentlemen, we have the bulletproof glass between us, so even Bob Hodge couldn't get to one of us today. By the way, I have a lot of people ask about Bob. He's doing much better and will be back with us when I let him out of my Sports Source quarantine. He'll be back with us on the show shortly. Guys, we got plenty of UT football to discuss, but first, I want to get, we always start by getting sort of the business stuff out of the way. What's gone on this week in sports? A couple of big stories this week. First of all, at the University of Wisconsin, Athletic Director Barry Alvarez sent an email out to Badger fans this week, and it was kind of scary. He said that a 10-game conference-only schedule, which is what the Big Ten is playing, would cost Wisconsin's athletic department between $60 and $70 million in lost revenue. Going from 12 games to 10 games, all in conference, would cost them between $60 to $70 million in revenue. If the entire season is wiped, they would lose more than $100 million. I'm not sure how he's doing his math. Still, though, pretty scary. And he also said the legacy of our extraordinary athletic department is at risk. I say this only to point out, as if people needed another underline on this thing, this is why the Power 5 schools are delaying this sport, pushing this sport back, and going full speed ahead with their football. 60 to 70 million at a Power 5 school, I mean, that's Tennessee's ballpark. We're not talking about McNeese State here. Thoughts on Barry Alvarez's word of warning to his fans?
I mean, I think that's sort of par for the course at just about every program. I think, or when this happened early on, we were talking about the idea of a season not happening. I think we described it as an apocalyptic event for higher education and sports, and it's true. I think the bigger college football programs are going to exist, but even at the biggest places like the Tennessees, the Floridas, the Wisconsins, I think you're going to see sports cut, probably a few sports cut if there's no football. Some of the smaller college football programs, I wouldn't be surprised if you have to cut if there's no season here. And so, I mean, it really is, you start looking at what can happen. I mean, it's not hard to see just why there is such a strong push to take some risks and play the football season because there is so much at stake. And that money just sounds like a number, and it's sort of hard to wrap your head around it, but when you start thinking about where all that money goes and what would have to go away if it's not there, you're seeing why that's happening.
Well, and when you're closing in on $100 million, that, even as a number, that's when it'll get your attention. Mm-hmm. Vince, your thoughts on just, David said it, it's why they're willing to take risks. Yeah. Problem is you're taking risks with other people's lives. Everybody knows what they're getting into. Players make it sound like they all want to play, which is cool, and I hope they do play. I hope they have sports. But there is a real tug of war here. There is all the other sports we're kind of delaying right now, but football's good because we need that 60 to 70 million we could lose.
Well, it could obviously be devastating. If you have even just losing those two games, it could be devastating. As David mentioned, losing other sports. And anytime someone throws out numbers like that, you can work the numbers in a lot of different ways. So even if there's fluctuation on that, the point is that if you lose this season, that's what, 2/3 of your athletic budget in a year. You can't make that up anytime soon, and then the aftermath will come. It's obviously something that's really scary, but those numbers should highlight not only the importance to the schools and the other Olympic sports, but also television as well. Imagine what television is going to lose from it also. So there's just a lot of way. It just highlights how much a loss of a football season would.
Yeah, and meanwhile, John, at Wisconsin, they also announced the start of a huge fundraising campaign to try and help replace that. And even in the news today, Rutgers shut down their football program because they had 10 positive tests. Mm-hmm. So you look at this in the Big Ten, these are projections for 10 games we would like to have.
Well, and that's the next point I was going to make is Michigan State announced on Friday they'd shut down their program for 2 weeks, their entire team, because 2 coaches and 1 player tested positive, and they'd all been mixed up together. Their entire team is in quarantine for 2 weeks. Now, Rutgers, that's 2 Big Ten schools, a league that was already planning on going conference only with their scheduling. It just shows, if you get this season underway, and this is why I've thought all along, and I still believe this, and we'll talk about the conferences next and what they're planning schedule-wise. I think they can make all the plans they want. You're going to see some schools that play 3 games, some schools that play 5 games, some schools that play 8 games. I think it's going to be willy-nilly across the country because once you get into a season, if you're practicing during the season and you got somebody that tests positive, how do you just shut down a few people? I mean, more than likely he's practicing with other players. I just think that the Michigan State, the Rutgers thing, those are the real warnings because there's nothing that says that can happen in September or October or November.
And I think you look at the NBA bubbles and some of the other bubbles, when you're testing every day and obviously have smaller numbers as well, you can prevent sort of the large-scale outbreaks. You've seen a couple people, have to be removed from the bubble if they test positive. But you look at how baseball's doing it, it's like the testing has been pretty inconsistent, and you're seeing players testing positive on game day. And college football just doesn't have the funds or the infrastructure to have anything close to a bubble, and especially if you have a college campus with tons of other people on it, and you're only testing symptomatic people, you're running the risk of, oh no, we thought we were fine, and then we have 15 people on our team that have COVID-19. So it's not good.
The lack of testing, that's a scary part. Mm-hmm. And then they have the standards of the 14-day shutdown if you're in contact with someone that has COVID. And then you have to wonder, all right, well, how do they define contact? So there's just a lot of things. I wonder if maybe the standards for Michigan State and Rutgers would be different during the regular season where they're trying to say, oh, there's not the contact versus right now.
And that's also, we talked about it last week, that the Power 5 conference, the NCAA sent down their recommendations, and everybody yawned. Right. And the Power 5 put out their own minimum requirements for their COVID testing. Well, why didn't you just go ahead and say this is how we're playing it for everyone? Because who's to say Michigan State isn't being too careful right now? Or maybe they weren't being careful enough. Right. Who's to say Tennessee won't be completely different in the way they handle things than the way Michigan State or Rutgers or someone else does? And I think then you get into the paranoia, the conspiracy theories that everybody in this country believes that if Tennessee plays Alabama and Alabama's got all their team and Tennessee's got some guys out, well, who did the testing? They didn't test Alabama. You're going to get that. They need one set. The Power 5 took a bigger step than the NCAA did in saying, hey, these are our minimums. If it's me, they need to get together and just say, look, here's the way we're doing it, period. This isn't the minimum. We're all living by this. Agreed? Right. And go.
Yeah, I think the lack the lack of transparency, though, I think across the board, some schools are not reporting at all. Tennessee obviously has some positives. They won't say how many that is. You hear multiple numbers about that. I think every school's handled it differently. And again, this points back to the same thing we've been pointing to since the first shutdown of the conference tournaments. No one's in charge of college sports, and these schools are out for themselves. The conferences can sort of loosely set some rules, but ultimately, if somebody doesn't want to say how many they've got tested or how they're handling it, no one can stop them. They're their own thing.
The transparency thing is a big deal, and we got to catch a break. But the transparency thing is a big deal because, what information do the parents have? Now, you would assume that if somebody on UT's football team tests positive, and all of a sudden he's not out there, everybody else on the team knows he tested positive and that's not why he's not there. So that information could go to parents, but then the parents could put that on Facebook, social media, anywhere they want, and it's going to get out, you would think, but it's just a mess. Why not just report? And I get the HIPAA violation stuff, but it's not a pain to say we had 3 players in football, 2 in basketball. I just think by trying to cover that up, you're not giving parents good information that we know of to make their decision about their children, but also you're not giving, you're not really covering things up the way you want to, because it's going to leak out. Some parent who knows what's going on, who heard it from their son, is going to tell everybody on social media what's going on.
Exactly.
And how did they think they got the virus if they tested positive? That's another part of it. Or were they careful and still got it, or did they go to a big party and then everybody was there? So we don't know those.
COVID party, nothing better on a college campus. Okay, hey, when we come back, let's talk about what the Big 12, ACC, and SEC are planning for scheduling. Big 12 still thinking they're going to go full speed ahead. I don't think they can, but we'll see. Come on back, we'll discuss all that next on the Sports Source.